I do not remember a time when my mother was sane. There was no before to the madness, no idyllic memory I could retreat into when things grew dark. From the moment I could form thought, the house was already heavy with it. The madness wasn't loud or violent, not the kind you read about in hospital charts or headlines. It was quieter. It breathed. The walls were jaundiced, lined with flaking paint that curled like burnt skin. The windows wore yellowed lace curtains that fluttered endlessly, even when the air was still. My mother insisted we never replace them. She said they remembered things. The television never turned off. It played religious broadcasts, always religious. Evangelists barking through clenched teeth, saints with plastic halos, preachers who smiled too wide. The volume was always just low enough that their voices became a background hum, indistinguishable from a prayer or a curse. Night after night, I would lie in my bed and listen to the low drone of divine damnation, my mother's muffled sobs syncing with the static. She wept like clockwork. Never for me, never with me. Her sobbing was a ritual, a communion with things I couldn't see. It started around the same time every evening, just after twilight, and always the same scent would follow. Stale alcohol, burnt incense, and something metallic, like wet coins. Our home was filled with relics, not heirlooms, those carry warmth. These were objects of obsession. On the living room wall, above our hand-me-down sofa, hung an icon of the Virgin Mary. Not the serene, benevolent one you see in chapels, but something more ancient. Her eyes were too wide, the pupils a touch too small. The paint had cracked along her face, leaving a jagged line that split her left eye, like a healed wound reopened. I remember staring at her for hours, convinced that she blinked when I wasn't looking. I hated that icon. No, I feared it. As a child, I believed the Virgin could see me even in the dark, especially in the dark. I would lie still, barely breathing, waiting for the shift of eyes. Once I swore I saw her smile, but of all the memories I have of that house, none are as vivid as the way my mother smelled. Vodka, mildew, and cigarette smoke soaked into her skin. Morning or night, she was never without a drink in one hand and a rosary in the other, fingers stained yellow from nicotine, nails cracked and sharp. Whenever I asked about my father, she'd freeze. Then, without meeting my eyes, she'd speak in that same monotone, voice flat and practiced. Your father is an angel, Michael. A real angel. She never elaborated, never allowed questions, just repeated it like scripture, as if the more she said it, the more true it would become. I believed her once, maybe when I was 5 or 6. I ran to my classmates and told them my father was an angel. I even drew pictures, a glowing man with golden wings smiling above the clouds. They laughed. They howled. The teasing was relentless. Angel boy, featherhead, God's mistake. Every bruise I got after recess bore the echo of my mother's words. And still, she wouldn't bend. No matter how often I begged for the truth, no matter how many names I was called, she clung to her delusion. Over time, I stopped asking. I stopped believing. In my teenage years, the house decayed further. Mold crept up the bathroom tiles like moss in a forgotten crypt. The wooden stairs groaned louder, like they resented each footstep. The lights flickered randomly, as if the wiring itself had grown weary of illuminating such misery. My relationship with my mother deteriorated like everything else. I called her a lunatic. I screamed at her to stop lying. Once I threw a chair across the room, demanding to know who he really was. She just stared, rosary in hand, face blank. Then, softly, with her lips trembling and her eyes glassy, she whispered, "He burned with light when he came to me. And you carry his sacred blood." That night, she scratched my cheek until it bled. Eventually, I left. At 18, I packed everything I owned into a single duffel bag and fled that mausoleum. The walls had absorbed too much grief. The air itself had weight. I left with no plans and no money, only one dream: never look back. I moved to another city, found a job washing dishes, worked my way through community college, and most importantly, I reinvented myself. Whenever anyone asked about my family, I told them I was an orphan. It was easier. I drank sometimes, like her. I told myself it helped me understand her. But it was never more than a drink or two. I was terrified of becoming her, of letting whatever it was in that house follow me into my new life. For a while it worked. The nightmares stopped. The static in my ears faded. The icon of the Virgin receded from my memory. I could finally breathe. But then, the feeling returned. It began with a shadow that never quite left the corner of my vision. It would dart just out of reach, always behind me, always watching. Sometimes I'd wake up convinced someone had just left the room. The air would still be disturbed, the sheets around me clinging like they'd been touched. I told myself it was stress, burnout. I even saw a psychologist once who told me I had residual trauma responses. That made sense. I tried to believe it. But then things got worse. One night, walking home from work, a car ran a red light. I didn't see it. I should have been crushed. But someone, yanked me backward at the last second. There was no one around. My chest heaved, heart pounding, and on the ground beside me, in the fresh snow, were a pair of footprints. Bare, long. Another time I stopped walking on a whim. Just paused. No reason. 3 seconds later, a massive tree limb snapped and crashed where I would have stood. The bark was blackened like it had been burned from within. I couldn't explain it, but the feeling remained. Then came the voicemails. 11 of them, all from my mother. The first 10 were garbled sobs, whispers, fragments of prayer in languages I didn't know. She repeated my name again and again, like a mantra or a warning. But the last message was different. Her voice was lower, hushed, like she was hiding. I played it 4 times before I understood the words. He's coming for you. Your father, he came. He came specifically for you. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just sat there, phone to my ear, ice in my veins. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years. I didn't even know she still had my number. The next morning, a call from a hospital. My mother had been admitted to the psychiatric ward. Paranoid delusions, violent outbursts. She'd been found wandering the street barefoot, covered in chalk symbols and blood that wasn't hers. The nurse said, "We need you to collect her things. There's something in the house we think you should see." I almost didn't go, but something pulled me back. The house stood exactly as I remembered, slumped like a dying beast, windows clouded with mildew, siding rotted through. The porch groaned beneath my feet, and the door still stuck halfway before it yielded with a moan. Inside, time had stopped. The yellow curtains still fluttered. The TV was still on. And the smell, that same smell, soaked into the floorboards. The nurse had packed her belongings into a single plastic bin. Photographs, old clothes, a shattered mirror wrapped in newspaper. but two items were separated from the rest. A thick, leather-bound journal, stained at the corners and warm to the touch, and a feather. Massive. Black. Its barbs shimmered like oil in the light, but at its root, the shaft glowed faintly gold. It didn't look like it belonged to any bird. Above her bed was a shelf, and those two items were placed together as if part of a shrine. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Her room was worse than I remembered. The walls, once hidden behind bookshelves and old posters, were now bare, revealing symbols etched into the drywall. Circles intersecting with jagged lines. Languages I couldn't read. But the largest image arrested me in place. A figure, tall, wings spread wide, arms open as if to embrace, drawn not in ink or paint, but in a thick, dark crimson. The blood had dried, but not faded. I couldn't breathe. The nurse told me these markings had been hidden. All those years I'd lived in that house, and I never knew what she'd hidden behind those walls. That night, I stayed at a motel, but sleep wouldn't come. Around 3 a.m, I heard something, a soft, rhythmic scratching from the walls. It wasn't rats. It was deliberate, like something was writing. The scent of my mother's clothes still lingered on me. I lay on the bed, eyes wide, and suddenly I was 7 years old again. Curled beneath a blanket, storm outside, thunder shaking the windows. I remembered her voice back then. "Don't worry, Michael. Nothing will hurt you. Your father's always with you." I believed her. Maybe she had never been mad. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was right all along. The scratching grew louder, not frantic, measured, intentional. A rhythm like pen strokes on paper. I pressed my ear against the motel wall. The sound was just beyond, yet somehow within. It wasn't in the room next door. It was in the drywall, like a finger tracing lines inside the bones of the place. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I went back to the house. The air inside was heavy. The kind of heavy that isn't just weight, it's memory, grief soaked into the wood, and something else. The curtains still swayed without wind. The TV still muttered scripture beneath static. That same priest, mouth wide, eyes too white, intoning something about sacrifice. I made my way to my mother's room again. The journal sat where I'd left it. The feather had not moved. But the wall was different. The blood-drawn figure, the one with outstretched wings, was glowing, faint like coals under ash. The eyes, once flat and dry, shimmered now with flecks of gold. I stared. I don't know how long I stood there, but at some point my hands moved on their own. The journal opened like it wanted to be read. The paper was old, brittle, but warm. Pages covered in drawings, wings, eyes, circles within circles, and words over and over in my mother's handwriting. He watches, he waits, he burns. More pages, more drawings. Some looked like me, half-formed, caught mid-transformation. One page just said, "You were never born. You were delivered." I turned the last page. There, drawn with surgical precision, was the image of the feather. And beneath it, in red ink, blood of flame, son of the radiant wound. He is waiting. The house sighed. A long, low exhale. I looked up. The figure on the wall was moving. Slow, subtle, but real. The wings stretched wider. The mouth, a simple line before, curled into a knowing grin. Not benevolent, not cruel, just inevitable. A warmth bloomed in my chest. Not emotional, physical. My sternum pulsed, like something inside me had woken up. Something that recognized what it saw. My knees buckled. I clutched my chest, fingers burning. Through my shirt, beneath my skin, something throbbed with light. Faint, but growing. It didn't feel foreign, it felt ancestral. Memories not mine flashed in my mind. A sky torn in half, wings of molten gold, voices speaking backwards, a woman, my mother, kneeling in ash, arms raised to something that bled sunlight. And I was in her womb, not formed, forged. My mouth tasted of salt and iron. Then, from behind me, a voice, not spoken aloud, but heard inside, a whisper in the marrow. You were never meant to be hidden. I turned. No one. But the feather was gone. In its place, ash, a perfect circle of it, unbroken, undisturbed. And in the center, a single word, burned into the floorboards. Rise. The house groaned again. Louder now. The windows didn't shake. They vibrated, humming with a tone I felt in my teeth. I ran, out the door, down the porch steps, into the pale daylight. I didn't stop until I reached the end of the block, but the humming followed. Not through the air, through me. Like a song only I could hear, like a name only I could answer to. And I did answer, because I knew, without doubt, what I had become. Not a prophet, not a sun, but a beacon. And something was coming, not for revenge, not for reunion, but to reclaim, because I had not escaped my mother's madness. I had inherited it, and in the echo of her voice, now burned into my thoughts like scripture, I finally understood what she meant. Your father is an angel. Yes. And now, so am I. But angels are not what we were told. They are not guardians. They are not gentle. They are fire and thunder and ruin. And I was made in his image.